This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. My name's John Bleasdale. I'm a writer and film critic, and I'm joined today by another writer and film critic, podcaster as well, an author. His name is Cai Ross, and he is, along with his friend Chris Bainbridge. He's a co-host and author of the book Free for All, which is a episode-by-episode guide of The Prisoner, the sort of cult British TV show starring Patrick McGoohan. And I've wanted to have Chris on the show for a long time because it's one of those shows which fascinates me, and I've loved, and I think I found it about the same time as you did, the early 90s, when they were repeating it on Channel 4. Is that right?
It was, yeah. It was the 25th anniversary, and it was the 25th anniversary of all things 1967. So I'd sort of just Sergeant Pepper and the Summer of Love and everything. So it was absolutely everywhere, documentaries made and all these sort of things. But we'd been primed a little bit. There was a show called, do you remember a show called TV Heaven?
Yes.
It was a sort of clips, well, not a clip show so much. It was just Frank Muir. It was a very easy job for Frank, bless him. He would just stand there and go, hello, this was in 1967, this was made. And it was a lot of basically shows from each year. I remember the 1967 one had Do Not Adjust Your Set, the sort of pre-Python thing.
Right, with David Frost.
Yes, yeah. So Channel 4 would sort of put on these things. And then it was the last ever one, and they showed The Prisoner. And the episode they chose was The Girl Who Was Death. And if you're a Prisoner fan, you'll know that you couldn't have picked a less representative episode, because it was a sort of one of these. It literally had absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the series. That he wasn't in the village. It was a story, but it was fantastic.
Yeah, it's almost like a bottle episode, the opposite of a bottle episode. It's like not in the bottle, it's outside of the bottle.
Yeah, but it was just, I'd never seen anything like it. And it had sort of been in the air. The whole prisoner thing had the cult thing had developed, I think, from about the mid-'80s onwards. Because it had a sort of stink of, not failure, it was just sort of, because of the ending, the last episode was so sort of divisive. And then it sort of went away a little bit, and then it started to find the right audience. And then they showed it again in 1982, and then it suddenly became this big thing. So I'd heard about it, and Chris and I, we both live about an hour away from Portmeirion. And so my mum saying, oh, well, it was only up the road. And so when we started watching it, I couldn't believe that it was literally within an hour's drive. And it just suddenly very, very quickly became this big obsession. So wearing the badge and everything.
So when did you visit Portmeirion?
Oh, I think that's almost immediately, that as soon as we could. The Christmas of 1992, I think, when it was still being shown, and they had a sort of gift shop there. There's a sort of in number 6's old house. It's still kind of there then, but it was the Prisoner shop, and of course they had these. They're the thing. There was a thing in The Girl Who Was Death. There was he drinks a pint. Do you remember this? And then you can just about see something on the bottom of the glass, and he has to sort of down the pint to see this thing that's saying, you've just been poisoned. And brilliant. Oh no, it's absolutely wonderful. But they were selling these stickers to put on the bottom of pint glasses, and which was highly irresponsible.
Yeah, somebody going to the hospital immediately after.
Having a stomach pumped? Oh, just with the mischief makers from the prisoner circle. But got loads of those pens and stuff. It was always a beeline to go there. But I mean, as a place itself, there's nothing like it on Earth.
And what's the history of the place? Was it some sort of industrialist, benevolent sort of industrialist, or?
Oh, I don't know about his kind of extra architectural sort of past, but he was a fellow called Clough Williams-Ellis, who was a master of the +4, wonderful sock-wearing gentleman. And I think it was his land. I'm not sure, but he wanted to create an Italianate village, but his kind of brief to himself was that he wanted to create a sort of a village that would basically work within the natural environments that it was already in, would enhance the natural beauty of what it was, as opposed to sort of fitting in a weird way. And he used to basically he'd call it a home for fallen buildings. It was he basically, if he put the word out, and if anyone, there's a sort of a colonnade from Bristol that they were about to put the wrecking ball through. No, send it up. So he sort of, all these things are about to be destroyed. He'd sort of no, ship them up to Port Merion, and he'd factor them into the village. So it's a lot of it's kind of almost secondhand buildings, but and then because of the Italianate thing, very quickly it started to get used as an Italian setting, which it does in Danger Man. You see all these places.
It's an earlier Patrick McGoohan show. It
is, yes, which we may be. I'm discussing with Chris tomorrow, in fact, for a Christmas show. But that you'd get that a lot. You'd see these old ITC shows, and so usually Warren Mitchell walking around with a moustache, saying, Signor Templar, you're here. And after some stock footage of the Colosseum. And I thought, I know that place, it's Port Merion. But it was obviously cheaper than flying them out there.
It's like the later series of The Persuaders, where there's the stock footage of Cannes, and then they're very obviously in Coventry afterwards.
I think The Persuaders, they actually went there. There was the budget eating travel thing. There's no, let's shoot there and use real champagne. You can see Tony Curtis and Roger Moore getting fatter and fatter with it. I don't know, using real champagne.
Well, that's a show that deserves a podcast in itself.
Surely, yes. I loved all that. It was. Do you remember it was just in the early 90s, and maybe they just needed slots to fill. But all those ITC shows started to just come back.
Man with a Suitcase was another one. I remember the Man with a Suitcase, they showed all those. And the other one that was great, it's a slightly different, it's not an ITC show, it's an American show. But, and I've got a real hankering to rewatch this, Crime Story, the Michael Mann, Dennis Farina-led show. That was absolutely brilliant. And I kind of haven't seen it. And I actually recently looked on for the DVD, because I thought that's a box set I'd eat, quite happily eat with a knife and fork. And I couldn't find it. It was like imports only. And, there wasn't or like $150 or something like that. It was very, very tricky to find.
Yeah, I remember. I don't remember it being on TV, but I remember seeing it in video shops. It was that classy. I just remember Dennis Farina's kind of mustachioed sort of snarl, sort of staring out to the covers. But there were loads of them as well. I can't remember.
Buffalo Bill from Silent of the Lambs is a recurring character in it. The actor, exactly. Ted Levine, the actor, is a recurring character.
He's ace.
Amazing stuff. Is she a big fat girl? So Patrick McGoohan, what about the sort of like origin of the show? Because this is a show that as you talk about in the book and on the podcast, is very much sort of Patrick McGoohan's baby.
Yeah. Well, it started the guy who produced it with him, or produced it for George Markstein. He was the one who came up with the idea. He'd heard of these places, basically holiday camps, where they would retire spies, and that whole concept. I mean, there was one called my brains, Inver Lodge or something in Scotland, and it was a genuine thing. They would actually sort of get these spies who were at retirement age, and you go and stay here and I think McGoohan just thought, what a brilliant concept, and I think Markstein wanted to do something a little bit more grounded and more like Le Carré, whereas I think McGoohan started to think, it started to sort of think outside the box a little bit, and then obviously the idea of that you couldn't escape, and it took on that slightly more science fiction-y edge. But it was a sort of it was just created by various people, and I think McGoohan was the one who just kind of went further with it. But he had a whole good crew from the Danger Man days. David Tomlin was his partner, and he was a fantastic. He became like the greatest assistant director the world's ever known. But I've been watching a lot of Danger Man for the podcast, and you just see these same recurring names in the credits. But I think it was certainly by the end of it, it was absolutely McGowan's opus. It became something of an obsession. I think he drove himself a little bit mad, taking on all the responsibility for doing it as well.
And perhaps, well, actually, let's come to the ending later, because it's, I don't want to jump the gun, so to speak. So I think that generic thing, it seems to be resonant of where it is historically as well, that Le Carre sort of anti-James Bond ordinariness doesn't quite fit into where they are in the 1960s. As you say, Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, 1967. You have a feel that they want this to be a metaphor. They want it to be Kafka. They want it to be science fiction. They wanted it to be a whole load of things. Yeah,
but also Danger Man, watching a lot of the Danger Man stuff, that really does have a lot of Le Carre in it. That's from the same sort of school. Obviously, it's not as dour as The Spy Came In From the Cold, but you can tell that they're being sort of made in the same era. Particularly the first tranche that were half an hour. It's a very different sort of titles. It's like very, very black and white. And then obviously suddenly you're into color, and it's just like there are only 2 Danger Man episodes they made in color, and the whole tone shifts completely. And The Prisoner is very much in color, and it's the whole attitudes changed then, but it's still, I think, it's trying to be anti various things. It's desperately not trying to be James Bond. It's not trying to be. It's trying to sort of go away from the curve, I think.
And again, I know you mentioned, I don't want to make too much of the Sgt. Pepper connection, but it has that 60s thing of sort of going through Victorian junk shops and Edwardian, it's got the penny farthing, and it's got the vintage car that he drives around. And even everybody looking like they're from a croquet party at the village.
Yeah, it's a very sort of rather not even British, very English thing, isn't it? But you're right, absolutely Edwardian, Arcadia, Victorian stuff. It was everywhere then, wasn't it? I think talked about this with Chris. It was a sort of rediscovery of Lennon, the Beatles. All these artists were sort of going back to their childhood a lot, weren't they? And they were starting to rediscover things like Alice in Wonderland and Wind in the Willows. And then suddenly and Pink Floyd were very big on this, weren't they? With the Syd Barrett stuff,
which was, let's face it, the best stuff Pink Floyd did. That's my that'll be my contention. I'll happily fight you with Broken Bottles. Bike was the peak of.
No, Bike was ace. Absolutely. Yeah. It's wonderful. The many stages.
Yes.
But no, it's absolutely at the peak of that. Possibly for the 1967 stuff, which of course they were making in 1966. And then by the sort of second half of the series in sort of 67, 68, the mood has sort of changed. It was actually getting away from that. It was getting just a little bit, but it was just not sort of peak 60s. It was peak 67, peak May 67. It was so specific. It was wonderful. It was very much a la mood.
I wonder as well if something to do with its reputation and the way it had to be sort of rediscovered in the 90s and rediscovered by different generations, rather than it just always being in our consciousness like other shows from the period. Partly it's to do with just the fact it didn't continue. There weren't other iterations, but also maybe partly it was to do with Patrick McGowan's career, that he didn't sort of go on to movie superstardom. So it wasn't like, oh, did you ever see what he did on TV in the 60s? In the way Roger Moore, people would go back and watch The Saint, or because Roger Moore then was in James Bond.
Yeah, it was interesting. I don't really know why. Famously, he sort of stepped out of The Prisoner for about 6 months to make Ice Station Zebra, or Zebra. I'm going to say Zebra.
Yeah, it's an American film, so I'm not sure what the pronunciation would be.
If I'll go with Zebra then, if it's American.
Yeah, it's a British novel because it's Alistair MacLean.
I'm going to go back to Zebra then.
Who was
But
American? No, I'm
Zebra.
joking.
Going back to Ice Station Zebra, it was I mean, he stole the show in that. I mean,
Mm,
it was Rock's thing and Borgnine and Jim Brown, but everyone was talking about how great Patrick McGoohan was in this thing. You think, well, and it was a huge hit,
mm.
and yet he didn't quite. I don't know if it was a deliberate thing, or I don't know if the prisoner burnt him out, but he didn't. You're right. He didn't have that sort of secondary '70s thing that exactly that. I mean, Roger Moore, I suppose, he did have the Bond thing, but he was still making pretty big films outside of Bond. But I
Mm.
guess McGoohan never had that big secondary burst as a movie star as opposed to a TV star.
Mm.
Despite the fact, I mean, he did. I mean, there's still these wonderful performances. Obviously, Escape from Alcatraz.
Right. Yes, of course. He plays a sort of sadistic warden of the jail.
Yeah, which is a wonderful twist that the ultimate prisoners become the ultimate wardens. But he was great. He was great in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, he was in, of course, the other thing, and I think you cover this in several episodes of the podcast, that his Columbo appearances.
Mm.
And
Oh yeah,
he was good friends with Peter Falk as well.
yes. I think they both enjoyed a dram, but they were also they both. I think they saw in each other a sort of a brother figure who kind of they could sort of go up against the networks because Peter Falk. You've interviewed you did shooting Columbo on one of your rights on film, and he was warring with the networks all the time. And I think with McGoohan, he saw somebody else who would quite happily just kind of go, "No, I'm not taking it," and just wouldn't accept any of their nonsense. And they were, and and who both took it very, very, very seriously. I think Peter Falk, he was an artist. He wasn't. He desperately wanted to make these things as good as they could possibly be, and McGoohan was the same. So I think they had a lot in common. And I think also McGoohan, for all his this is my thing, he worked well with like minds, like David Tomlin, like Peter Falk. I think he kind of worked better as a duo or as part of a team. And he did. He wasn't just in them. He directed a lot of those. He rewrote a lot of his episodes. So he was a big part of Columbo. I think Peter Falk's whenever he got the chance, he'd sort of go on about how great Pat was.
I mean, one of the great points I love from David Koenig's book, and yeah, the episode we did on Writers and Film was brilliant. Shooting Columbo, I think it's called "The History of TV's Most Rumpled Detective."
Yeah.
I love one of the stories is that he did whenever he'd come back from a John Cassavetes movie, he'd do Husbands or he'd do Woman on a what's it called? Woman Under the Influence. I was almost going to say that. Yes. No, I was going to say that. So I channeled that mistake into you. I projected it onto you. Woman Under the Influence. When he'd come back from filming one of those, he would want to transfer that into Columbo. He'd go, "Let's just improvise scenes. I don't want to go with a script. I want to improvise script scenes." And they'd be like, "But this is a really carefully constructed teleplay where we need the audience to know information. Otherwise, it won't make sense because it's about an intricate crime and you detecting it." And he was like, he didn't care. He just wanted to, to have it. He wanted that honesty in the TV shows, and it goes with what Patrick McGoohan was quite happy to do. I think with The Prisoner was have real ambitions above and beyond what I think other people were expecting.
Oh yeah, very much so. That was great. He used to do sort of just endless takes, and it's like, this is a TV show piece. We don't do endless takes. We do two.
Absolutely.
And he had Cassavetes in one of them as well. Etude in Black, and I think Ben Gazzara Ben Gazzara actually directed my favorite episode, Friend Indeed.
Is that the one where they're on the cruise ship?
He directed that one as well.
Yeah,
with Robert Vaughn.
That's right. Wearing the amazing red sort of a black suit he looks like Benicio del Toro in The Usual Suspects. It looks amazing in that. And that's one of those where you learn a fact from a Columbo episode, which is It's a really throwaway line where it's a feather, and they say, "Oh, well, maybe it came from a pillow." And he goes, "Oh no, they don't. They have foam pillows in a medical place because of allergies." And you just go, "How the hell did you know that?" And plus, I'm going to memorize that forever. I'm always going to remember that fact. What was the other Ben Gazzara episode?
Ben Gazzara was a friend indeed. It's one where he plays with it a little bit. It's the chief commissioner is the baddie. But it's got this, and it's got a real sort of grittiness to it, which sometimes you don't get in Columbus. They can, it's just more grittier than and the baddie. I forget his name, Richard Kiley. It doesn't even try to make friends with him first. There's none of this kind of sort of jocular sort of to and fro's between them. He's Columbus his subordinate, and he makes no attempt to sort of befriend him at all. And so by the time he sort of gets him in one of the greatest gotchas, it's such a wonderful sort of you deserve this.
Yeah. I'm going through them at the moment, and I think I'm on season 4 at the moment. I'm just sort of treating myself to a Columbo every 2 weeks, and it warms the heart how good they are. There's such quality TV. There's room. There's room in your screening schedule for one, great sort of crime series.
Well, there's a channel over here. I don't know if you get it, but every Sunday that's all they put on. So it's just almost impossible to miss them.
Right.
But it does. I mean, I don't have that kind of time in my life, alas. But that sounds like a perfect day, just not getting up. It's nothing but Columbo, just endlessly all day.
Just ration yourself one every 2 weeks. That's
just suddenly think about it. Actually, no, that's just gorging. You need to ration these things.
Yeah, because otherwise you start to see the strings and you start to see the repetitions and you start to see, I see what they're doing there. And but I also because that's how they made them. They made them kind of quite rarely. They would have like a year in between seasons and things like that. So they would spend a lot of time on them, as you were saying. There's a lot of care spent on them.
Yeah, and they were made by really good. I think Jonathan Demme directed a couple. Sort of a bit like The Prisoner. Actually, they had and also Danger Man. You start to see these directed by. And a lot of these things, Charles Crichton, Seth Holt, these are, wow, my God, these are proper movie makers. There's a reason these things look so good. And Don Chaffee, who directed the first, I don't know, they were spread across, but I think the first tranche of episodes, he directed it. He was a pretty Jason and the Argonauts. He directed A Million Years BC. He was a big. He was used to sort of creating massive widescreen epics, and it shows. A lot of TV when it's directed by journeyman, to use sort of you can kind of tell, or people who are actually used to just making television shows. When you actually started to bring in more cinematic eyes, it definitely showed.
I always thought that bit of him running across the beach and getting caught by the bouncing ball is like, that always struck me as something that wasn't televisual. That was something that felt like a movie,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's just something about that image was much more graphic and much more, cinematic.
Oh, I agree. And it was very handy. You can tell the episodes that were actually shot there, as opposed to because they would basically shoot as much as they possibly could on set or at Port Merion. And then a lot of the time they would have to go to Bournemouth where they'd shoot the interiors, and they'd have these cloths with pictures of Port Merion on the background. And you could kind of tell. But the ones that were there, because there was no sort of, well, if we turn the camera this way, we'll see the gaffer eating a sandwich at the edge of the stage. So we've got this kind of limited amount of camera space. You could just turn it anywhere. And there's an episode, Dance of the Dead. Do you remember that one? With Mary Morris as number 2, and it's just like and there's this spectacular shot or scene set on the beach with the tides out, and they're having this chat, this sort of interrogation, sort of number 6 and Mary Morris, and it just looks. You're just watching this. This isn't telly. This is this is something much, much more going on here. And also in the editing as well. That first episode, Arrival, when he arrives, there are scenes where he's looking around, he sees somebody in a clock tower, and he sort of runs up, and there's nobody there, and then he goes down. But it's the way it's edited is very, very unusual for TV at that time. Again, it's the kind of thing you would expect us to be sort of watching in a cinema.
I mean, there's talking about that thing that you were saying earlier in terms of things were changing, 1967 May, and how specific it is, and how we're going away from the hippies, and we're going away from that. There is a sort of pessimism to there is a sort of spikiness to the. It's not. It is a fun show. There's a lot of humor and all the rest of it, but it's not a fun show. It's not an easy watch. It's always kind of disturbing. It's always kind of prickly, a bit like McGowan's own character.
Yeah, I mean, it's designed in the. I think we mentioned this in the book. It's a bit like The Fugitive, in as much as he can't leave, so he's doomed to lose at the end of every episode. So it's going to have that sort of, not so much downbeat, but he has kind of little mini victories. There are a couple of them where he sort of like one of the great episodes, Hammer into Anvil, where he reduces Patrick Cargill to a dribbling mess by sort of driving him mad and making him resign. And it's like, yes, you won. Well, he's still a prisoner. But and other ones where he's sort of this sort of like a draw, but ultimately he's got to lose at the end of every single episode. And I think, in terms of what he was trying to sort of get at, in the metaphor of it, of what he was trying to sort of say, he was being very challenging. I don't think he was being optimistic much. I think we'll talk about the ending in a while. I think it's a sort of, this is what we need to do, but I think it's undercut by a sort of sense that, but I bet we're not going to do this though. We are sort of, to a certain extent, doomed. It's a kind of, if we only do this, if we only sort of start changing and doing this, we'll get through this. Well, I don't think we will. So it's that sort of, it's kind of what I mean about the sort of the optimism of 1967, and then the sort of kind of the increasing sense of doom of 1968. They're two very different years in terms of what we're about to, where we're at.
For me, it was always, while I was watching it, there was always a sense of this absent number one, that you had the number twos were always changing. The number six was him, and he was always asking, who's number one, and it was almost like there was. I remember once I was teaching Citizen Kane to some of my students, and we were teaching it. We were discussing it. They'd watched it, and we were discussing it. And someone said to me, spoiler for Citizen Kane, Rosebud. They said it's meaningful, but it's not explanatory. And I thought, that's really interesting. That's such an interesting distinction. I know what you mean. It does mean something. But when you think about it, it doesn't really. I mean, if it explains, if you're saying it explains everything, then it's kind of very trite as a film. He became a big media mogul because they took away his sled. It's sort of like which symbolized his childhood and blah 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 blah. But if it means something a bit more poetic and resonant, and you can't quite pin it down, then I get it. And the same is sort of true of number one. Is it like, what is this thing? Oh, it's just you. Could be quite a trite way of going forward. But the fact that number one is sort of the power behind everything, and it doesn't, it's more a force than it is an individual.
Yeah, and I guess. I mean, another spoiler alert. I mean, after everyone thinking, it's going to be the butler or it's going to be this, it turns out that it was actually, and again, an extraordinarily edited, brief scene. It turns out to be himself. But in exactly the same way. No, that isn't himself. It's just by this point in this particular episode, everything is a metaphor. It's not even vaguely a spy show by the final episode, but it's not. But that barely scratches the surface of what of what that actually means, or what that even suggests. That you're your own prisoner or something. I mean, you can sort of reduce it to slightly sort of something as trite as that, like we are our own worst enemy. That's what it's all about. But it's I mean, we could talk about that for hours and hours and hours and hours. But and again, that's kind of what the hope, the element of hope that I was sort of talking about. They said, well, if you actually accept that, then there's probably something you can sort of take control of yourself a little bit. But I think without saying, oh, it's all everybody else's fault. No, it's mine. It's me. I'm the one. I'm the one who's still in bed at noon.
Yeah, but I mean, like that ending was. I mean, how was that received? Was it? It was, because I haven't looked into this as deeply as you have. I obviously saw it as the ending, and to me, in the 1990s, it felt of a piece with the whole show and crazy AF, as the kids say, but not necessarily, not necessarily wildly out of.
Well, it was. I think because there were so many. So it was doing very, very well. It was a big. The numbers for its viewing figures were in the tens of millions. So it was still a big show. It wasn't designed to be a little cult show. It was designed to be a big primetime thing. So all in the papers, who's number one? Da, 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 da. Oh, we're going to find out. So it was a big deal. And everyone was literally expecting a chair to turn around and it would be Orson Welles stroking a cat or something like that. And it was just like, and then it was, what? Was it, and no one could understand it. And it gets a little bit apocryphal at this point. Apparently Magoo was chased from the country. People were sort of, the ITV switchboard just basically caught fire, and pitchforks and torches and all that sort of stuff. But it was designed specifically to not to be controversial, but to sort of get everyone sort of reacting. Whether that was kind of, how dare you? I've sat through 17 hours of this. I wanted Roger Moore to be number. You've denied me. Or people just going, oh, genius, brilliant. So I knew it was going to be him all along. And little things like, in the opening titles every week, it says, who are you? I can't remember how it says now, but you. No, I can't remember. There was sort of hiding in plain sight bit of dialogue, which I can't, brain is.
Well, maybe even it's a sort of, who is number one? You are number 6, sort of.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, you, comma. all that sort of stuff. So it was. I mean, it was newsworthy. It was in all the papers the following day and everything. My God, what's he done? And I think that's exactly what McGowan wanted to do. I think he desperately wanted. He didn't want some passive sort of. Oh right, great. Oh, what's on BBC Two now?
Yeah, exactly.
He wanted everyone. Yeah.
The end of the Truman Show. That's got to be one of the best endings of a film ever.
Isn't it brilliant? Yeah.
Yeah.
See that, John?
Yeah. That's whatever the great drama is about the Truman Show, everybody will just turn over. It's not like, no, it's not going to be the end of the world.
Exactly. And if you ask Chris Bainbridge, he'll say, because there was, I don't know if you, it's best to pretend it never happened, but there was an actual remake of The Prisoner.
Jim Caviezel.
Jim Catweasel is and it was all a sort of dream and a big pharma thing. Forget it. If you ask Chris, the best remake ever of The Prisoner was The Truman Show. It's like if you were going to do it now, in an age of 24-hour rolling TV and all that sort of stuff, that is exactly what The Prisoner is.
How do you stand on the sort of, okay, it's a metaphor. Do you feel there are metaphors and analogies which are sort of like coherent? I know I read Alex Cox's book. I think you had him on as a guest, didn't you?
We did, yes. That was 8.
And he's got a very. I might have even put you in touch with him if I remember rightly. He's got a very specific theory about what The Prisoner is, and it's like. That's it. It's the British nuclear arms program, the independent nuclear attempt to get an independent weapon.
I think he's a rocket scientist.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
I think the whole thing is like all these clues that have been sort of laced through the whole thing. Is it turns out, and then at the end, of course, the number one is housed within a big rocket with the word one on it. He's a rocket scientist, and it was like, okay, all right. But it didn't really seem to explain anything else. But I mean, what I love about The Prisoner is that you can go, well, oh yeah, that's what I think it is. Well, brilliant. I'm not 100% sure you're right, but whatever I think is, you're welcome to disagree with it as well. I think that's what's given its longevity. If it was about a specific thing, I think if McGowan just said, the whole thing is about my reluctance to join the common market. You go, oh right, that's what it was all about. All right, and it would just immediately cease being interesting.
So you're saying he's a Brexiteer then? You're saying it's...
Oh no, certainly not. That's the other thing, because McGowan is very ambiguous. You don't really know where his colours are on what his mast is. You know, he was never particularly in interviews. He never sort of gave the game away, but he was very sort of gnomic and sort of cryptic about everything. I think the only thing he was very specific about was the whole thing about the penny farthing, and that he was very anti. Well, not so anti. He was just very wary of the way that we were developing in terms of technology far too quickly. We were progressing. This was being invented. Well, we'll get this now, and then it was, and then something else. But we'd never actually stop and go, "Is this helping or hurting us?" We just kind of take it on board instantly. And then we were being overwhelmed by it, and we were being overwhelmed by a technology we didn't quite understand. And I think with everything else, he was kind of, well, why don't you bring your own thing to it? You know, and with that, he was like, no, we are progressing too quickly.
That's so funny. I've never thought about how long the penny farthing actually probably was in. You know, was it like the BlackBerry of bicycles? Like it had a brief 5-year stint where everybody rode around in penny farthings, and then someone said, "Why don't we have two equally large wheels and maybe not so large?" And the penny, and it was like, no, penny farthing monthly was like the letters page. We're like, no, this is rubbish. We want our big wheels.
10 years later, all the hipsters still driving penny farthing. Your equally shaped wheel nonsense. What a weird, it's just a strange thing. You thought, why didn't you first go with two wheels of exactly the same size? It's not like if you tried that first and it didn't work. Well, how about if we made the front one 5 times the size of the back one? It was, I'd love to be in there at the sort of design meetings when how they came up with that as the first idea.
Yeah, there's a great writer who once mentioned the idea that we've had wheels for years and we've had luggage for years, but it was only like 20 years ago somebody said, wait, why don't we put wheels on our luggage? You know, I mean, it's like, instead of carrying them around all the time, why don't we just put them on the bottom and we can roll it around? Because that's you watch 1970s, 1960s, people are always carrying essentially massive boxes with handles, you know, massive, very heavy boxes with handles, right up until like the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah. Oh my God, I didn't have. I think the first. Yeah. I'm sure didn't they reject an idea like that in Dragon's Den? Wheels on bags? Are you mad?
It'll never work.
People enjoy carrying their luggage.
Yeah. It's got.
You're taking something away from them.
It will fall. You know, if it'll roll downhill if you're not watching, and there goes your luggage. So, do you have a pet theory? I know you were saying, you know, oh, it's great. It can be anything to anyone, but of course, there's also part of the joy of that is working on your own pet theory and thinking, yeah, I think I've got the answer, and you being the expert who's written about it and read about it and podcasted over it, you must have some sort of.
I would substitute the word expert for enthusiast.
Okay.
I think one of the lovely things about doing this is that other people have got in contact and got involved, and people who really are experts.
Mm.
And so I'm still very much just a very, very keen enthusiast. But oh yes, thinking about your question, I'm honestly I'm stumped here.
Kai is currently boarding a rocket with the number 1, blasting off into space.
Not really, to be honest. That I'm equally. Put it this way: you're talking to somebody who has a tape deck in their car. I'm kind of, I'm very much of the opinion that I share it with Magoo, that we sort of keep inventing stuff that we don't need and becoming obsessed by it and that sort of thing. So I always latched onto that. And to an extent, I'd sort of, every episode that there'd be something like that, I'd sort of see that. So that was always my kind of my way, my interpretation of things, which I always liked.
Sort of a reaction to the onrush of technological.
Yeah, there was always something slightly sinister about it, and then that it was always slightly more. It was cleverer than us, and it would start to overwhelm us and make us more. There would be something nefarious about it. It wouldn't help us, even though it would be designed. We'd think, "Oh, this is great! I don't have to do this anymore." But there'd actually be something. We'd lose something instead. And then other people, somebody with malicious kind of intent would actually sort of somehow work that out, and it would always go a little bit wrong. So this is the kind of reason I still have videotapes. Not many.
Yeah, from the telly.
But I still got stuff I taped from the 90s. Yes.
Yeah. I think I've got something upstairs. I've got a box set of Hearts of Darkness and Apocalypse Now video cassettes that
I've got taped off BBC Two.
And I've got the radio. I got the Romeo and plus Juliet widescreen, because I remember when widescreen came in, because videos were always pan and scan, and before Blu-ray there was the widescreen section of the video HMV, which was like where the true cinephiles met. So moving away a little bit from The Prisoner, I wanted to talk about a project that we've collaborated on, a podcast, which is based on a novel I wrote called Connery, which is a speculative novel. And and this is now going to be available. We're going to be putting out episodes weekly. It's performed by Kai. It's such a funny thing listening to your own novel. Being sort of, it's an amazing thing. I'm going to be frank about it. It's been an absolute pleasure to sort of listen to as you've sent over the files, to listen to them being performed, and especially congratulations on a superb Sean Connery impersonation.
Oh, it's extremely kind of you, John.
See, it's not just the shushes; it's the sort of back of the throat sort of talking. It's the bass.
It's the noises he makes. I think the main one is like the creaking cellar door, the kind of. There's a lovely bit in Last Crusade, and I think he says something like, "Oh, that's really good." But it's like kind of the creaking, and in the Untouchables, there was a lot of
Why would someone say they were someone they were not?
Yeah, who would say that who was not?
Which makes no sense. because they're a liar. Because they're criminals. What sort of policeman are you?
You're letting him off. Yeah. What, you said he was from the Treasury officer? That's the first thing I'd say to get out of whatever it is you're about to arrest me for. Where are you from?
I'm from Ireland. You haggish.
I'm just a poor beat cop.
Yeah, he's so good. He
is so good. He was a lovely actor. I think because people, he couldn't do accents. Well, fine. Like people, that's what acting is.
Richard Burton never did an accent in his life. I mean, wait a second. Maybe he did. When did he do an accent?
I'm
He
not thinking
very
that.
rarely does an accent. I mean, he's always RSC after a couple of pints. You know,
I
Ridley
can't
Scott
think of it.
described Russell Crowe's accent in Gladiator.
Yes,
Which,
which is
by the way, I see a lot of Richard Burton in Gladiator. I think that's the look they were going for, was sort of Anthony from Cleopatra, that
yeah.
era Richard Burton with the hair and everything. So I mean, this was an idea that we both kind of had of turning it into an audiobook. I can't remember at the beginning if it was your suggestion but
Well, I just wanted to. It was like a test thing, or for a what do you call it? My God, my mind's gone blank. Just a sort of a demo that I was trying to record, but I don't. I just want to. I don't want to just do it. I thought I'd better ask you first.
Oh, right, that's it. Yes, I remember.
And then it was like, oh, should we do some more of these? It's like, yeah, it's quite good fun. This.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
it? But did I get it? It's felt like about asking you sort of if I've toweled your bathroom okay while you're on holiday. Was it kind of what you were after?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the thing that's I think is difficult about the novel. Let me just explain for our listeners what the novel is about, and then maybe and then that will help me answer that question. It's basically the story of a young boy who meets Sean Connery, or maybe not. It's never quite sure how much of this is in the protagonist's head, and following this encounter, he's kind of inspired in different ways of different decisions he makes in his life, and he has a career which is kind of nefarious and violent and weird and darkly comic, hopefully. And so to come back to that, and then throughout his life, he meets Sean Connery at various moments. So it's a little bit of when I not when I was writing it, but afterwards, when I sort of reread it, and I go, well, what does this remind me of as a reader? It reminded me a bit of Play It Again, Sam.
Again, Sam, yes, I was going to say
the Woody Allen, yes, exactly, the Woody Allen sort of relationship with Humphrey Bogart. True Romance does it a little bit with him meeting Elvis in the bathroom as well. It had that, but if the Woody Allen character in Play It Again, Sam was sort of more a Patrick Bateman-y kind of
yes,
psychopath.
like Cumbrian Psycho.
Yeah, exactly. Cumbrian Psycho. There's I missed that as a subtitle. That should have been there. Connery, the Cumbrian Psycho. So I thought that you really got that tone, because you basically have to play you have to play a whole range of characters, because he goes to different places. It's very sort of globe-trottery. Slightly inspired by Bond. He goes to Paris on his first mission, and spends some time in New York. And that's kind of supposed to be like, you'd have the James Bond where Diamonds Are Forever takes place mainly, I mean, the book as much as the film takes place mainly in America and things like that. You'd have these very specific, geographically located. There are some James Bond films which are really geographically located, actually. You sort of Live and Let Die is just in Harlem, and
I'm just starting to read that one now.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great book as well. It's a really that's one of the more sadistic ones.
Yeah, and I just read Dr. No as well, which is remarkably similar to the book, to the film. Because some of them really are. I mean, The Spy Who Loved Me is. I mean, but increasingly they just basically bought the title.
Yeah,
and that was it.
Ben McIntyre wrote a great book about Fleming, and he said that I think Spy Who Loved Me came after Goldfinger. It came after one of the more successful ones, and he said it's just like seeing somebody in a decathlon, beat the world record in the hurdles and then kill a judge with the javelin. in the next event. It's such a disastrous drop in quality that it's that everybody was sort of astounded. Oh, maybe Ian Fleming is a serious novelist. Oh no. Yeah, absolutely. What attracted you to the novel because of course you would, as you say, you were doing it as a project, but you read the whole book at that point, and so
Well, it was up on Substack. I thought it was very, very funny. Some of the, uh, I know you don't want to hear the sort of praise being piled upon you
no,
too
no,
much.
no,
It's
I
kind of
do, I
nauseating.
do.
John, you're a genius.
There you go. That's what
Uh,
it is. That the rest of this
I mean,
podcast will just be that on a loop.
no, it was. I just thought it was genuinely very, very funny, very incredibly, incredibly dark at the points. But I thought you got the balance just right. Um, and I enjoyed reading it really. But as a trying to do to capture Sam Coleridge, as he's called, brilliantly, um, because he's so incredibly violent, just unpleasant, and you can't play him. I thought it'd be quite. You were trying to obviously go for something slightly comic, so I thought the best way to do it would be to have him play as just the nicest person in the world, you know.
Yeah,
The way you just describe, and then you're describing these appalling things he does in a way that kind of sounds like Paddington.
mm, mm.
Not quite so, but just going for that sort of that. If you were going to play him as some sort of somebody who knew he was villainous, people trying to play bad as bad. I think, oh, come on.
Yeah, I mean that's where the Patrick Bateman thing sort of falls down. It's like Patrick Bateman's an evil yuppie, even if he isn't a murderer, so it doesn't really matter. Whereas this guy genuinely thinks, why do I keep getting into all this hassle when I'm when I'm trying my best to be, to be nice, and everyone should just get on with everyone. And
yeah, yeah. No, it was. I don't. It was just, and there were lovely as you went through it, there were callbacks to the start, and you felt that something was making more and more sense as you read it, and it was, I don't know, just thought it was really good.
I forgot. I forgot it on. I put it on Substack. That's absolutely. Yeah. That was right in the very first weeks that Substack sort of came out, and I thought, oh, what could I use this for? What could I, And I'm not sure how many people actually went through and read the whole thing there. I think it's about. I mean, the first one got a lot of sort of clicks and whatnot, but by the end it was about 40 or 50 clicks. So you're just sort of going, okay, some of these might even be people who've just clicking for the very first time and going, what's this? Doesn't make any sense. It was only
halfway through they realized it wasn't the autobiography of Sean Connery.
Well, I do worry about that actually. When I was first sort of pitching it to as a to my agent, who kind of wasn't too keen on sending it out, I have to say, hence the podcast. That it was kind of that sense that maybe calling it Connery, people would want more Connery in it. They'd want it to be a novel about Sean Connery that is sort of like Blonde for Marilyn Monroe.
Yes, yeah.
But I always had this idea that, well, I mean, growing up in Cumbria and being, I always had this idea that I didn't live in the middle of nowhere. I had to get a bus to get to the middle of nowhere. It was like, it wasn't even as central as the middle of nowhere. I did have a rich fantasy life, and I just thought meeting people who were famous was so impossible. It was so unlikely that it just struck me, wouldn't it be interesting if that was, a thing, if that happened, if that actually happened, or if your imagination was strong enough, you could behave like it actually happened, and that would somehow nourish you and nourish your inner life with what you needed.
Was that the spark that sort of set it off when you started writing it?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely things about Sammy that are similar to my childhood. Definitely the setting, some of the geographical locations are pretty much taken from areas around where I'm from. I hasten to add, I haven't killed anybody or any dogs or any old women and in the hills or anything like that. But I remember as a kid, I would definitely, any trip to the toilet would involve me screwing a silencer onto my gun and taking out some terrorists on the way up the stairs and rolling a grenade into the living room before I came down and machine gunning the survivors. That, and to be actually perfectly frank, I still do it a little bit to this day, garrot the odd imaginary sentry.
I used to, but I don't have the knees anymore.
Right. Well, watch Wild Geese and see how much. I
was watching Where Eagles Dare, and I know it was famously called Where Doubles Dare, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was Clint Eastwood's crack.
Yeah, but there were so many fantastic scenes of like this Richard Burton sort of abseiling down a cliff and then just dropping into shot. This quite clearly a different dimensioned man dropping into shot.
Talking about, Clint Eastwood had he's one to talk, because if you watch the first Fistful of Dollars, there's a scene where he's sort of galloping from one sort of setup to another, and he's very obviously not only not Clint Eastwood, he's not wearing a hat, and he's got like an afro. It's just really, it's like the worst possible double ever. It's just like guy on horse. He'll do, There's another Richard Burton film called Breakthrough, which was have you seen that with Lee Marvin?
No, is that the one where he's a German soldier?
Yeah,
1980.
Yeah, and it's an unofficial sequel to Cross of Iron, Sam Peckinpah's Cross of Iron. He's got the same name as James Coburn's character in Cross of Iron, and it's just absolutely. He's so old, and he's so obviously got a bad back. I mean, like in every action scene, you can see he's got a bad back.
Yes,
it's like, has he been shot? Oh no, he's just got a bad back.
If he has to do anything more than pick up a pen off the floor, they call him a stuntman.
You can see him wince as he moves a piece of paper across the table. As he lights a cigarette, it's like, oh, ow. God damn it.
Even his hand with the lighter.
Yeah. It's obviously a fake hand. This comes up.
God can't raise it, old boy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right, tight close up here. It was amazing. Some of those actors. We talk about this with the Prisoner. These actors. Like, my God, he must be about 65 there. And you look him up, and he was 38.
Yeah.
Connery, in Diamonds Are Forever, he was 40.
Yeah.
What?
I'm 10 years older than Connery was in Diamonds Are Forever, and I don't look anywhere near as old as he looks in that film.
No, my God, he just decided I don't have to try, I don't have to stop anything and eat whatever I like now. And I kind of just in those times, he kind of. His Bond films, he aged so rapidly throughout those five. Oh, yeah, was it 5 or 6? 6 initially did, wasn't it?
6, because then he came back for. Oh no, he came back for.
He skipped 1969, didn't he? So there was a bit of a 2-year gap. But he, and then of course, poor Richard Burton. You think, well, look at him. Well, he's 75. Of course, he's going to. No, he's not. He's not.
No.
But I suppose none of us, I don't think anyone drinks that kind of quantity of scotch now as was standard back then. Trevor Howard.
He was on 2 or 3 packets of cigarettes a day as well. I mean, he was puffing away through cigarettes all the time.
Got my oath.
Yeah. I mean, he's just the best. He's my favorite actor, I think. Burton and Connery are the 2 actors I come back to time and time again.
Yeah. Connery, I was thinking, because do you know what? There was obviously you're a Robin and Marion fan.
Yeah, Richard Lester. Yeah.
Because one of the other things when you're doing Sean Connery, you suddenly have to just imbue yourself with as much kind of masculinity as you can possibly inject into yourself, because that's kind of what he is. That's kind of. But watching Robin and Marion, there's such a lovely scene where he's talking to her, having rescued her, and he just says, it's just a simple line. He says, "You're so beautiful." And his eyes, he's puppy. He just turns into a puppy. And he could do all these different things. As I was saying, he's such a much, much better actor than people take him for. They just think he's this big star. But a lovely, lovely actor, I thought.
I think the same thing's true of Michael Caine to some degree, that people, for years and years, there was this idea that Michael Caine was wooden and always played Michael Caine. And then no, he does so many daring things, you know.
Oh, I'll be down a sec. That's very kind of you. Oh, sorry about this, listeners. I'm being offered appetizers.
Oh, lovely. Oh, lovely. Yes, appetizers.
Rice on Film will now become temporarily the cooking show.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about recipes before we started recording. We should have just included all of that.
We should. In fact, we should actually. Rice on Film from now on should end with a recipe.
Well, go on. Give us a recipe, because you of course have a wonderful restaurant in North Wales.
Oh, this is true. Yes, I would.
500 meters from this cinema.
as the crackling noise as the advert ends.
Westless is available in the foyer.
In the interval, you'll be able to buy King Combs.
If you're drinking Bacardi. Do you remember that?
The dog and duck down the high street.
Yeah.
Catching
the last bus home.
You think, hang on, I was 10 when I first saw this advert in the cinema. I'm 19 now. Surely other people are paying for adverts.
Yeah, yes.
It's Ray Brooks.
Do you have a recipe for us?
Oh, I'm trying to think. There's actually a recipe for a posset in our prisoner book, which was rather nice.
What's a posset when it's at home?
A posset, sir. It's a sort of cream-based, slightly meaty affair. Sort of cream and a touch of honey, and then you sort of drink that as a sort of. I think it was the kind of thing they drank before Horlicks was invented.
Ah, I see. Right. So
and a sort of a soporific quality to it. It's also a nice set dessert. Goes well with if you infuse it with lavender.
There you go.
There you are, listeners.
There you go, listeners. With the first ever recipe. And by the way, that links to our Columbo chat earlier, because you bought me and sent me Cooking with Columbo.
Ah, yes. Have you done anything for me yet?
Yes, I think I did the chili from there.
Yes, Johnny Cash's chili recipe.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Yes. The lavishly illustrated, by which I mean there are photos of food that look like car accidents in there. It's a little bit like if you look up Vincent Price and cookery. I mean, bless his heart, he's trying, but the photographs aren't exactly appetizing.
That's the thing with any book from the cookery book from the 70s. What was that camera, the film stock they used that made everything looked like it was set in aspic.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it.
I think everything was set in aspic.
That might have been the aspic. I think the cause of that was aspic more than anything else.
I know. It was foolishly somebody invented at exactly the same time aspic and the ring mold, which meant that every single 70s dinner party would have something set in red jelly, usually some prawns or something. God, we were lucky to dodge that.
Often those paper cuffs that they put around the legs of chickens and turkeys.
Lamb cutlets on the
little paper, just in case you want to pretend they've got cuffs and cufflinks and whatnot. I remember my mum, 1978, making the first spaghetti bolognese in Cumbria, I think, and shocking and impressing her friends in equal measure. I'm not eating any of that foreign muck.
It's disgusting. Look at that.
Absolutely.
Oh, God.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
I had to...
Go ahead, Kai.
No, I was going to say, a while back, we had a bit of a sort of 70s party once. And we were trying to eat cook up some of the stuff that we used to eat when we were kids that was amazing, like Angel Delight and stuff like that. And to a man, every single recipe was just disgusting. My God. I don't know if they've changed everything. But, I mean, I remember I could just squeeze kind of bags of Angel Delight into my mouth all day. I would have been a happy child. It was God almighty.
I used to eat raw jelly.
Oh yeah,
You remember you used to get cubes of jelly? I just used to eat them like that without making them into jelly.
Oh yeah,
And that was
toast. We did instead of we were making some appetizers like toast with toast toppers. Do you remember that stuff?
oh yeah, yeah. It was a kind of weird grey green mush.
It was yeah. I mean, to steal a line from somebody else, it looked like somebody had tried to invent vomit without the aid of a human stomach. And then it was mass produced and, just put it on toast, maybe. I think you put it on toast, then you grilled it.
Oh, God, Lord.
It was from the same devious minds that brought you sandwich spread. I know. This recipe section's taken a terrible turn.
I know. I remember going to Quick Save to buy vodka, and the cheap vodka, when I got it home, I looked at it and it was too cheap to be called vodka, and it was called Tolstoy Spirit Drink. And it was like
4%.
94% or something.
I know, it wouldn't even strip paint.
Yeah. Oh, God, Lord. Brilliant, Kai. I think we've encouraged everybody to go forth and revisit the 70s and the May 1967. So the book is called Free for All and named after the podcast, which is also called Free for All. I'll put links in the show notes, and I'll put links to our new podcast, Connery, which is the first episode is already up, and the second episode is due up this week as well. So hope everybody who listens to this will give it a shot. And thanks very much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Bon appetit.
Grazie.
I'll be seeing you.
Grazie tanto. Oh, that I should remember. I should have to say something now, shouldn't I? Is there a stock reply that I have
to be seeing you?
Yeah.
No, just as simply as
I'll just shout and slam a door or something. Or turn around in my chair.
Just very quickly inflate a huge white balloon and throw it at me.
Okay, there you go. Take care, Kai. Lovely talking.
You too. Good night.